Welcome everyone. I am delighted that you have joined us for today's webinar, Trailblazer Tuesday with April Rai. My name is Dr. Hilary Nixon, and I am the Deputy Executive Director of the Moneta Transportation Institute at San Jose State University. MTI's mission is to increase mobility for all by improving the safety, efficiency, accessibility, and convenience of our nation's transportation system. We accomplish this through surface transportation research, technology transfer, education, and workforce development. MTI currently leads 2 competitively selected multi-university consortia. Today's webinar is part of MTI's Trailblazer Tuesday series. In this series, we hear insights from trailblazing women from academia, public and private industries, as well as the nonprofit sector. We are so excited for today's webinar in this series that features MTI trustee and Conference of Minority Transportation Officials, or COMTO's, CEO April Rai. April Rai is president and CEO of COMTO, where she works building upon the organization's 50-year history of ensuring transportation meets the needs of all users across 40 chapters in North America. With over 15 years of experience managing private, public sector, and nonprofit organizations, including as Deputy Executive Director for the Women's Transportation Seminar International, WTS, CEO for the National Organizations for Youth Safety, and Manager and Affairs Analyst in the Office of the Dean at the University of Maryland's School of Nursing. What an impressive bio and background, April. We are so glad to have you. And for our audience members, as we carry on today's discussion, feel free to submit questions into the chat or the Q&A feature, and we will try and get to as many of them as possible. But let's jump right into our conversation, April. So I am always interested in hearing about a person's transportation story. So how did you first enter the transportation industry? What initially drew you to this field? And maybe looking back, were there moments early in your career that really started to shape the kind of leader you wanted to become?
Thank you so much, Dr. Nixon. And I just want to thank Karen Philbrick and Alvarita and Kat and the entire MTI family for the opportunity to be a guest today. So back to your question, looking back, recently I was in California at a speaking engagement, and I was talking to a COMTO member about my beginnings in Southeast San Diego, where I was raised. And we were talking about subtle influences and how it shapes who we are today. So I have to say what initially drew me to this field, I think subconsciously, was my mother, who worked for Caltrans in the Disability and Evaluations Department. And she would bring me to work on Take Your Daughter to Work Day. This was started in the 90s to expose girls to career opportunities. I think now they call it Take Your Child to Work Day. And back then, I had no idea about mobility equity or economic access or any of those things, but I got to see firsthand how when transportation works, it improves people's lives. And I got to see that live and in color as my mom helped people who had various disabilities to access transportation and get to the most essential things in their life. So right out of high school, my first career was really a sign language interpreter. And then later on, I jumped into advocacy and public affairs. And the first transportation related role that I had was around road safety and working with youth. So I have to say, leadership wasn't really on my dashboard. It was really about just being a positive contributor to my community. That was my North Star. That is what I was focused on.
No. That's wonderful. I hadn't heard some of those stories. I've met you before. We've had great conversations, but that was pretty neat. And I love that idea of kind of the subtle influences and how much a parent can influence the roles that their children take. So I want to kind of continue our conversation into this area of leadership, because you mentioned that you hadn't really been thinking about leadership so much as just how can I make a positive influence? So when we think about the fact that leaders such as yourselves, we come from all kinds of backgrounds, and we have different approaches to be successful leaders. So how would you describe your leadership style?
I have seen so many different approaches to leadership in my career, but I think if I had to pick one, I would say servant leadership, 100%. Because what that means to me is modeling the behavior, the hustle, the grace that I expect from my team and that I want from my leadership. And so some of the things that my team hears probably too often is number one, that we're colleagues. And when I introduce them to folks, I say my colleague, not my subordinate, or, we're in the trenches together. And they know that I won't ask them to do something that I wouldn't do or haven't already done myself, and that I'm never going to put them into a situation where they're unprepared. I want to make sure that they are set up for success. And my team also knows that I hate surprises, meaning, as a leader, I want to make sure that my expectations are clear, the benchmarks have been set, and I've offered time for connection for bumps along the way, blockers, and offered my support. This is so important in all spaces, but especially in the nonprofit space where hopefully people are connected to the mission and they really need to feel valued and seen. And that means that I have to work hard to create an environment where folks are motivated to bring their best because they are moved by the mission and the impact that they can make.
Yeah, yeah. I really love that. And I loved what you talked about, kind of that modeling the behavior and the respect for your colleagues,
Mhm.
and how you all are working together as a team. And I also really appreciate your recognition. I don't know that you use these words, but these are the words I put into my mind. But recognizing, yes, we make mistakes. How do we learn from mistakes? I
Mhm.
think you use the phrase bumps along the road. We
Right,
all have bumps along the road. How do we learn from them? And how do you, as a leader, also kind of, recognize and acknowledge your own bumps as a
right.
as a learning process as well? Um, and then, so let's turn, because you are within, you've had a lot of roles within the nonprofit sector, and I think that a really important element of being in the nonprofit is coalition building and partnership development. That's not to say that it's not in every other sector as well, but I think it's uniquely important within the nonprofit.
Mhm.
So what have you learned about bringing together organizations as well as leaders with different priorities to work towards that common goal, that connection, coalition building, and partnership?
This is so important. And I think I've learned, even with the best of intentions, it's difficult sometimes. And it's not always about agreement, but it's more about alignment. And I think a lot of times when you're trying to bring folks together, it can fail because folks are so focused on defending their position instead of determining what are the shared outcomes that we can agree upon. And so in transportation, we connect with public agencies, private sector firms, small businesses, community leaders, labor organizations, advocates, and elected officials. So many different folks coming to the table with different priorities. And it's only when we can all identify the larger purpose that everybody can see themselves inside of that we can have a breakthrough. And hopefully, that breakthrough is about supporting the community that we're charged with serving. Hopefully. But sometimes it means we have to learn how to communicate in different languages. You know, technical folks speak a language, researchers speak a language, community advocates speak a language, policymakers speak a language. Great leaders are multilingual. And that means sometimes breaking it down into simple terms. Sometimes it means making the business case for the thing. And sometimes people just need to feel like you've heard them. So you just need to listen.
Mhm.
So in the end, we've heard that term, relationships move at the speed of trust, but trust moves at the speed of consistency. So when you consistently show up, when you consistently do what you say, and when you consistently keep your values strong, then you build the trust and then you have a breakthrough and hopefully you build coalitions of different stakeholders.
I love that. And I really resonated with your discussion about different languages. I'm a urban planner by background and training, April, and I do a lot of education on how do we as planners go out into the community and really listen and hear what the needs are. And we have to get away from that plannerese language, that technical language that you talk about, and building that trust and long-term commitment to
Mhm.
wanting to see your community built up and become great. And how do we do that? And I think that the understanding these different voices and how do you translate technical language into something that is understood by anyone regardless of background, and also to
Mhm.
have really that respect of their language that's coming to you from their community perspective as well. um, so I'm always interested. In fact, I just came back. I was at the WTS International Conference
Mhm.
in Los Angeles
Me
recently,
too.
and I was there. I was like, and I think one of the things that I heard over and over again at that conference was the importance of mentorship and
Mhm.
sponsorship and those relationships that more mid-career senior leaders in the field can have in terms of lifting up and providing opportunities for the next generation. And I know that COMTO, WTS, many of the other organizations in our industries have long emphasized the importance of mentorship and sponsorships. So let's make this personal. Or how have mentors or sponsored influenced your own career?
Mhm.
And how can leaders today, such as yourself, such as maybe some of the others on our webinar today, how can we intentionally support the next generation of transportation professionals?
Well, I have to say thank you to all of my mentors and sponsors. You know who you are. They have helped me navigate, at the time, uncharted territory for me. And that has been transitions in my career, challenges in leadership, stakeholders that are, a little tricky to connect with. I would not be here without mentors and sponsors. But I think, first of all, it's important to know the difference between the two, and understanding that typically mentors are the ones who help you grow. And that might mean having some tough conversations, and that might mean, keeping it real, and telling you about areas of improvement or challenges that they observe from their perspective.
Mhm.
And it also is about helping you see untapped potential. On the other hand, sponsors help you to see your value before you fully see it in yourself, and they tell other people about it, even when you're not in the room. And so it's really about that advocacy for sponsors. And that means inviting me into rooms that I hadn't imagined myself being in yet. So I think these days we need to make sure that mentorship evolves, because I think younger professionals, they're not just looking for career advice. They want authenticity. They want honesty about the uncertainties, the failures, the burnout, how you've reinvented yourself, how you've stayed resilient, how do you manage work and life. Those are the conversations that sometimes are the most essential for someone to be able to grow and reach their full potential. And I can't say enough about reverse mentoring. I have stepped up my technology game. I have been introduced to very unique perspectives from people younger than me. And I think it is so important to learn from all generations, because they all have something unique to share that can help us all with our forward journey.
I I love that, and I think that's the first time I've heard the phrase reverse mentoring, and I realize how powerful that is, because I think sometimes maybe people become reluctant to step into the role of mentoring because maybe they're thinking of it as just a one-way street. But when
Mhm.
you can think of it as this two-way street and how I can benefit as well from serving in this role, it's, you're right, incredibly powerful. And I really appreciated that you defined and clarified kind of the difference between mentorship and sponsorship and how important it is when you are serving in, let's say, a sponsor role of 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 even when that individual is not in the room, highlighting them, raising them up, making others in our community aware of them. I think that's a really important element. So
And
thank
I'll
you
say
for
one other
this.
thing, Hillary, just
Yeah.
in follow-up, because sometimes
Yeah.
people ask me, especially emerging leaders, they'll say, April, where can I find a mentor? Where can I find a
Mm,
sponsor? And I think it's just important that we expand our horizons on
hmm
who we might consider a potential mentor and sponsor. They might not look like you, and that's okay. They might not be exactly you. They
hmm
might be a different gender. They might, be in an adjacent discipline in that
hmm
industry, but they may still have very valuable insight to share. And so sometimes we need to look beyond our immediate circle to find an appropriate mentor or sponsor.
Yeah, that's great advice. So thank you for bringing that up. Um, During the registration, folks had the ability to submit questions in advance. So I've got a few questions that I want to make sure we get through, but I also wanted to open it up and make sure everyone here on the webinar live knows that if you've got a specific question that you want to have April dive into, please submit it into the chat or into the Q&A feature, and we will get to them. So April, you're a woman in transportation. You've worked with many women in transportation, and you had that leadership role with WTS. So
Mhm.
where do you see the future for women in transportation? We know we're a relatively still small percentage of the overall workforce. But where's the future for all of us?
I Okay, so I love the movie Toy Story. And to quote Buzz Lightyear, to infinity and beyond. That is the future of women in transportation, to infinity and beyond. I feel like the next era of transportation, it is going to require leaders that are multifaceted, emotionally intelligent, collaborative, thinking long term. And those are some of the qualities that women have been showcasing for years, sometimes without recognition. So I think we're moving to a new place where people are realizing that you can't reach your full potential without women leading. You can't reach your full potential without having a diverse set of ideas at the decision-making table. You need all ideas at the decision-making table to reach your full potential. So I think with that being the case, the future is endless.
I love it. Infinity. I love it. I'm
Infinity
going
and
to start
beyond.
using that phrase because I also love Toy Story. Um, and I think there's been some reports that I've seen come out from some of the big consulting firms
Mhm.
about the bottom line importance of having a diverse, gender diverse in all kinds of different ways in your business and at the executive level in particular, that it helps your bottom line. So um,
Absolutely.
I
Dr.
I am,
Karen Philbrick knows the exact percentages because she's very good with data. She knows the percentages of boards and organizations who reach their full financial potential if you have diverse decision makers. And I wish I knew that number, but it's a big one.
it is. I agree with you. So something about it was like, and I struggled with the whole concept of being a leader because I was a
Mhm.
department chair and I really thought myself, I am here to help keep our department moving forward, more on that management side of things, not necessarily a leader with a vision, but I certainly saw that maybe I was on a pathway to move from, oh, a good contributor, a good member
Hmm.
of the team,
Hmm.
to more of a strategic influencer. And so I'm wondering, I know that you went through that transition as well. So, what mind shift happened or mindset shift happened for you that helped you move from I'm that strong contributor on the team to I'm a strategic influencer in your leadership journey?
Well, thank you for saying that I'm a strategic influencer. A little imposter syndrome there. Wow, don't look at myself as that, but I appreciate you saying that. Um, I really just think one of the things that I focus on everywhere, every space that I occupy is being a solutions-oriented individual.
Mm-hmm.
And that means whoever I meet, when I am networking, when I'm connecting with other organizations, when I'm in a opportunity or collaborative meeting, I am always thinking about what I can bring that is valuable to the table. How can I help solve an issue for the person that I'm connecting with? And it's like being indispensable is being influential. So when you are constantly focused on answers and solutions to problems, you inherently influence the spaces you occupy. So being indispensable is being influential. People will seek you out because you are a solutions-oriented individual. And it doesn't mean being a rocket scientist. Sometimes it just means applying your knowledge and your experience to someone's issue and providing a unique perspective that provides a potential solution that just never came into their stratosphere.
I love that. I think one of the things that I have loved so much about this conversation is I am taking away a lot of incredible advice for myself. I know that our audience and the folks that watch this in the video that we'll post afterwards will benefit as well. But when you personally have these conversations and I feel, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to take that advice. I want to be able to do that. That's a great perspective. So thank you for that. And I guess that kind of brings me to my next question. I've been in transportation now a little bit longer than I'd like to admit, but around 25 years or so. And I've 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 been in the industry a long time. I have a fair amount of experience. What are the things that I could do or people like me could do to to better help and support those who aren't as far along in their journey or may not have even started their journey in transportation yet?
Mm. I think one of the most important things that we can do who've been around a little bit is to continue to use our stage and the spaces that we occupy to promote examples and ideas worthy of duplication. And maybe that's a little bit less about preserving our own legacy and more about legacy transfer. But we need to make sure that we are uplifting ideas that are innovative and that work and that support others. And in that way, we build a bridge for others. Sometimes it's tangible. Like, can we make introductions? Can we call out an emerging leader who had a great idea,
Mm,
or who maybe is unseen? Can we recommend an emerging leader for a speaking opportunity, or to connect with us for an opportunity that we have? And how can we share the institutional knowledge that we have? So it's not in a silo, but it is openly shared for everyone to
yes.
benefit from.
That's wonderful. And it actually, so it's a beautiful segue because we'd had another submitted question during registration. You mentioned speaking opportunities and this opportunity to raise up the voice, the name of emerging leader.
Mhm.
But what do you do a ton of speaking opportunities? I know that you're here this webinar, you were at the WTS conference, you've got the COMTO annual conference coming up
Our
this
50th
summer.
bid.
Woohoo! But what role do you think these kind of speaking opportunities play in advancing women and diversity in our industry?
You know what? I think that it uplifts visibility, and offers a new perspective. You know, when people see someone like me or someone like you speaking with authority about transportation innovation, technology, policy, infrastructure. It expands who audiences believe should be in those conversations. And that shifts the narrative because
Mhm.
it allows us to move beyond this conversation about what's broken or, what's wrong and shift it to here's what's possible because of the perspective that I bring. And then, opportunities like this is great because it creates an ideas exchange.
Mhm.
Like we can scale solutions faster when ideas are exchanged openly. And so thank you to MTI for creating this space where we can share with people a valuable perspective and folks can see leaders from all different backgrounds speaking about the things that they're passionate about.
Oh, absolutely. I love this series. I love this kind of work and these kind of conversations. And I want to make sure we are coming to the end of our 30-minute webinar, but I I want to make sure we have a chance to tackle one last question. And I'm sure that you are asked this many, many times, but what advice would you offer? What are the takeaways for young professionals, especially others or those who've been traditionally underrepresented in our field? Um, what advice would you offer them if they are considering a career in transportation?
We need you, first of all. We need you badly. Your experience is not a liability, it's an asset.
Hmm.
That's something I wish I would have told my younger self because I felt like my experience was unique in a bad way. But everyone has a unique experience, and that is so valuable. And in some cases, even though we're getting a lot better, if you're the first or the only, that's okay. Go for it. Go for it. We need you. Find an ally, maybe someone who doesn't look like you, to support you along the way. They do exist. And I would just say, don't limit yourself to a single lane because transportation is everything. It's technology, it's public health, it's climate, it's housing, it's workforce development, it's finance, it's all the things. So
Mhm.
it doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
We need you, and the future rests in your hands. So don't worry about fitting yourself into a space. Redesign the space because we need you.
I love that. I so much of that resonated, April. Sharing a small personal story. My dad's favorite expression when talking to me was "go for it." He's like, "Uke, I came from this small rural farm community in the middle of nowhere." And he was always go for it. Never did I expect to be have this incredible career in academia and transportation and be able to work with folks like yourself.
Mhm.
And you also, I really love this idea of experience as an asset and
Yeah.
the lived experiences that each one of us brings to the industry, to the table, to the conversations is just so important. Um, so thank you so much for everything that you have done for the industry, for folks like myself, for folks like yourself. I really want to thank you for sharing your time, your talent so generously with us. For all of our participants, this webinar was recorded and we will make sure that we've got the link available, which will be sent out. I do encourage you to share with your network. I certainly have learned a lot from this conversation, Rachel. Rachel, I think I need to change your name, April, to Rachel. Um, That's it.
My mom
Official
might have
change.
something to say about that. She likes the month names. I don't know.
Um, because I think that there's been so much value in this conversation, April. And so, one last note before we go. Please join us on July 21st at 12 p.m. for our next Trailblazer Tuesday webinar. Our featured guest will be Dallas Area Rapid Transit CEO Nadine Lee, who is actually one of COMTO's Women Who Move the Nation, so award winner. So we are really excited about that conversation. If you would like to register, we've put the link in the chat for details. And again, April, this has been an absolutely phenomenal conversation. I've loved
Thank you,
every minute
MTI.
of it. Ah, thank you and all you do at COMTO. And with that, we'll wrap up the webinar. Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks so much.